I think a large part of it is because we don't fund healthcare properly. I mean, even, a vastly poorer country like Cuba actually has lower infant mortality than the United States, which is astounding.
Where are you getting those figures? From Cuba or from...
You should go online and look at the CIA handbook. The Central Intelligence Agency has a handbook.
Oh, their World Facts Handbook, yeah.
That's right, the World Facts Handbook. And that itself acknowledges that when you compare the figures for the U.S. and Cuba, that Cuba has, it's not a big difference, but that Cuba has a slightly lower infant mortality rate than the United States. Now, if you look at some other countries, like the Scandinavian nations, I think, Holland too, which we were just talking about, killing more babies, as I say, well, so it kills a handful of babies a year who are severely disabled, where doctors and parents decide that's better. But there's a much larger number of babies' lives that are saved because they have better health care. And countries like Singapore actually also has a vastly better infant mortality rate than the United States. So we don't do too well on that. But the other thing I would say is if you go to poor countries, you really want to save human lives. I mean, there is an appalling rate of deaths of infants and small children. According to UNICEF, the United Nations Children Foundation, 27,000 children die every day from poverty-related causes. That's about 10 million a year.
And those are completely preventable deaths.
That's right. I mean, they're dying from diseases that we could either prevent by helping people to get better sanitation, safe drinking water, bed nets so their kids don't get malaria, that sort of thing, or they're diseases which we know how to cure. Simple things like diarrhea, where we can provide the cure, or measles. We have effective vaccine against that. So there are things that we could do if we were just prepared to put a little bit more money into it, put the kind of money, say, that the Christian right puts into elections. And if you were to put that into some of these organizations that are working to save lives around the world, I'm sure it would be far more effective, and it would really be making a difference in saving lives.
That would be a real pro-life agenda.
I think it would, yes, and it would certainly be one that I would support as well.
One issue, Peter, that divides so many people, even some secularists who agree on so many other issues regarding kind of a naturalized ethics, is the issue of abortion or stem cell research, really the moral status of embryos and fetuses. Questions like, is abortion moral, or should we destroy embryos to do stem cell research, stuff like that. The crux of it is, are these frozen embryos that we want to use for scientific research, are they human life and therefore worth being protected? Is there a sanctity to human life? You broached this topic earlier, but I find it just really interesting that you seem to disagree with many pro-choice people on this matter. You say the question isn't whether or not a blastocyst is human life. You concede the fact that embryos and fetuses are human life. A blastocyst is human life in the sense that it's a member of the species Homo sapien, and it is alive. It is a human life. So here's the question. If you concede that embryos and fetuses and blastocysts, that they're human life, then doesn't it follow that as a human life, it's an innocent human life? I mean, it doesn't deserve to be killed. And because it's always wrong to take an innocent human life, isn't abortion or stem cell research that uses embryos, isn't it unethical?
You're right about my views. I'm quite happy to say that the early embryo is a human. What else can it be if it comes from human parents? And it's alive. I mean, you can tell when it ceases to grow, and it's not going to grow anymore, then it's dead. But as long as it's growing, the cells are dividing, it's alive. But what I reject is the assumption that if a being is human, then irrespective of the capacities that it actually has, it's wrong to end its life. I don't think that being a member of one species rather than another, whether it's Homo sapien or the chimpanzees, Pan troglodytes, or whatever else it might be, is what determines whether it's wrong to kill. What determines whether it's wrong to kill is the capacities, the characteristics that a being has. And the embryo doesn't even have the capacity to feel pain. It doesn't even have a nervous system that's sufficiently developed to feel pain. That happens at some stage, perhaps during pregnancy and the development of the fetus, but the best estimate is that that happens well after the time at which the great majority of abortions are carried out. So in that sense, the capacities of these embryos or early fetuses that are being aborted, and certainly of the embryos being used for stem cell research, is less than that of non-human animals. It's less than that of dogs or cats, because obviously they can feel pain, they're conscious beings, and the embryo or early fetus is not. So I don't see why the fact that it's human should make it wrong to kill it.
So the question is less, you're saying, about whether or not it's human and more about whether or not it's a person. You know, these certain mental qualities like self-awareness, or I don't know, what other qualities merit being put in this category of having some moral rights, that we'd have moral duties toward it?
Well, the first thing would be that the being is capable of feeling pain. It's a sentient being. Until a being is sentient, I think you have no moral duties towards it. You might have moral duties towards its parents or its mother, you know, who love and cherish the fetus because of the child that they want it to become. But if they don't, then I don't think we have duties to it. Now, a second important stage is reached when you have not just the capacity to feel pain, but some sort of self-awareness, some sort of capacity to understand that you're alive, to have that you have a future, that you have desires for that future. To kill a being like that is a different sort of thing, because you're cutting off that being's wishes and desires and hopes for the future, and making hopeless the projects that the being had. So when you get to that sort of point, I think you have something much more serious. But that doesn't happen until some time after birth. So that's why I think that there is really a difference in the killing of a small child as compared with an infant. I don't think a newborn infant has this kind of capacity at all.
Is there much of a difference for you between a newborn and almost newborn? In other words, still in the womb, but not yet birthed. Like there seems to be no magic category that says, oh, it's all right for an abortion to happen if the baby's not yet been born.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's a continuum, and to that extent, the people who are opposed to abortion have a point. That is that they say, well, you know, where is the magic cutoff line? And their argument, of course, is, look, it's all a continuum, so you've got to go back to conception. There's no cutoff line after conception.
And when they do that, they're talking about things like ensoulment. It's not just that it's human life, but that it's sacred human life. God put a soul in the Homo sapien, or something like that, right?
Yeah, I don't know how they know when God puts the soul in. I mean, people have had different views about that through the history of Christianity. Yeah, that may be their view, but a more defensible anti-abortion view, I think, would just say, well, because it's all a continuum, we should just start with conception. But my view is, yes, it's a continuum, but there are significant points in the development that make the killing more serious, and the two most significant points are, firstly, the development of some sort of consciousness, and secondly, the development of some self-awareness. And that does take you past birth, and that's why it challenges the conventional views, and that's why basically most of the pro-choice people don't really want to talk about that, because they know that politically that's not a good move. But I do think that it's implicit in the idea that the fetus does not have a right to life, is that you have to say something about when the right to life develops.
And that it develops because of these mental qualities.
Yeah, well, that's my view, that it develops because of mental qualities. I mean, the problem is to say otherwise, to say what is it about birth that makes such a difference, given that you can have a premature infant born at 6 months of gestation, and you can have a fetus in the womb at 7 or 8 months of gestation. So does birth make such a difference? I find that a little difficult to defend, the view that just that the location inside or outside of the womb makes all the difference. Now, of course, the pro-choice movement would say, well, we're talking about the woman's choice to control her own body. And that's okay as far as it goes, but of course it doesn't help you much when you come to embryos and stem cell research, because they're never in the woman's body. So if the whole argument in favor of abortion is supposed to be based on the right of the woman to control her body and not on anything about the status of the embryo or fetus, you've got a problem in saying why it's okay to destroy